Good morning and welcome to our daily devotional from Pilgrim Congregational Church. I'm Patrick Horn. Very glad to have you with us on this Friday, February 25th, as we've been reading and studying this week the story of the transfiguration of Jesus in Luke chapter 9. And this morning, I would like for us to focus on two verses from Luke chapter 9, verses 32 and 33. So this is in the middle of the transfiguration story, and I'm going to read these two verses, offer a few reflections, and close us with a word of prayer. Luke 9, 32 and 33. Now Peter and his companions were weighed down with sleep, but since they had stayed awake, they saw his glory and the two men who stood with him. Just as they were leaving him, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah," not knowing what he said. Well, this is, of course, the part of the transfiguration story in which we have Peter blurting out his response. But there's several things to note here. The first is that Peter, James, and John were trying to fight off sleep. The passage suggests that they're very sleepy and barely awake, but awake enough to realize something was happening. And so they were very drowsy, and the passage suggests pretty strongly that they were not fully attentive to what was happening, and were in fact in a kind of state of shock as the event unfolded. And the passage is making clear, and I think the message is for the reader, that these disciples, the closest disciples, the earliest leaders of the church, were in a state of shock because they were not watching and praying. It's similar to both the earlier panic on the boat in the middle of the storm, when they rushed to wake Jesus and cried out for his help. And in the Gospel of Mark, it even says that they suggested that he didn't care, that they might be dying. And then also these verses remind us, of course, of the Garden of Gethsemane, when the disciples fell asleep as Jesus prayed. So the disciples are portrayed here as not acting in a faithful way. And this comes out when Peter rouses from his drowsy state and half shocked, recognizes Moses and Elijah. And he immediately thought of the Feast of Booths, a celebration of the wilderness wandering of Israel. And so he offered to do what is done during that celebration, and that is to build little booths as a part of the celebration. And he offered to do so for Jesus, Moses, and Elijah. The text says explicitly that he did not understand what was going on. He thought it was a time of celebration and failed to appreciate that it was a time to prepare for the cross. And in fact, that phrase in Luke, that not knowing what he said, is one that appears in the Gospels to explicitly indicate that the people who were talking didn't understand the nature of what Jesus was called to. That is, that he was going to suffer and die on a cross. And so Peter and James and John are not ready. And the passage is trying to make this point, I think, to the reader. And the question that we're left with, I believe, is, are we prepared? Are we doing the things that we should be doing to prepare ourselves for all manner of obstacles and difficulties, including death? Let's close with this word of prayer. O God, who has set us amid the bonds of time, this hurrying pace of life frightens and amazes us. We cannot crowd our purposes into such a narrow space. Before the day has worn to noon, or we have even planned the work we meant to do, the night comes down upon us and we can work no more. The swift years pass and find us little further on. We wake to mourn what we have missed, to value most what comes no more. Forgive our waste of precious moments, our loitering feet, our procrastinating will. Teach us to number our days, that we may apply our hearts to wisdom, to lengthen our brief life by intensity of living, to fill swift hours with mighty deeds, to lay up treasure where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt. Seeing we spend our days as a tale that is told, let us haste to speak that which is within us, lest we be called away before the story is begun. If there is anything thou hast meant us to do in life, spare us till we have accomplished it. If there is any kindness we can show, may we not neglect or defer it, seeing that we pass this way but once. So may the very stress of earthly life educate us for the life eternal. Amen. Thank you so much for joining me this morning from Pilgrim Congregational Church. I'm Patrick Horn, and I hope that you have a very good day and a good weekend. Goodbye.